This is from Brett Schewitz. What was it like working with Michael Jackson? Did you have much involvement with him? And was he in the studio on all the occasions you recorded on his songs?
No. Michael was never there when I was recording. He would just give me free rein to do whatever I wanted, and then he would take off. But he was really cool. I mean, I liked working with Michael. He's an insanely gifted guy. I mean, I think we all know that. But working with him was actually very, just like, wow, you know. And it was fun. It was inspiring. And, you know, in the studio, I just did my thing. And he seemed to be pretty happy with it. But, you know, doing live performances and touring around with him, because I played in Europe with him and Japan and some LA stuff and New York. And it was just really cool because he'd have this massive choreographed production going on. And he was just so, what's the word for it? Just so attentive to detail when it came to the shows. Like really, really paid attention to the dynamics of what people were going to see. You know, sort of like a, you know, like a circus act or something like that. And, you know, just all these different things going on. And then he would just let me do my thing, just run around and do whatever. And he was really cool, you know, off stage, very low key and you know, sort of laid back and down to earth kind of a character. You know, I only saw him raise his voice once. Yeah, nice.
All right, this next question is from Con Caravias. And Con's question is, if you hear someone else's cool lick, do you sit down and try to learn it?
I don't actually sit down and try and learn it, but I figured out in my head. So you hear it and you start to put it together, you know.
And has there been a riff?
And if you can't do it, then maybe you sit down and try to figure it out. But I think that's one of the fun challenges of being a musician is you do this longer and longer, how much shit you can figure out without ever having to pick up a guitar to sort of do it. And then you pick up a guitar later and you play it and you go, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, nice one, nice one. All right, Robert Whitson has a compare and contrast question for you. What was the vibe like in the studio while recording both the Appetite and the Illusion albums?
Completely different. No, I mean, it's a natural thing. I mean, the first one was, you know, like just going into the studio, basically knowing the material and putting us into the studio. It's like sort of like putting us in a china shop. You know, just a bunch of rambunctious guys who have really not the most sort of considerate when it comes to putting us in somebody else's spot, you know. In somebody else's space. So we'd go in there like we own the place and we just jam out the stuff. And it was, you know, it's hard to describe it, but it was very sort of just like bam, bam kind of thing. Where when we did Use Your Illusions, it was a much bigger, obviously, production. It was almost cliched rock star stuff. Yeah, so it was a whole different experience. A lot more money involved, a lot more time. But I actually look at the Use Your Illusions as being quite an accomplishment, considering how screwed up we were at that point. Getting us all back in the studio and getting that all together and finishing it and stuff. You know.
Yeah, nice one. All right, Cassie Blackney. Has working with Myles Kennedy taught you anything that has influenced your music?
The main thing about working with Myles, from that point of view, is I can do just about anything, and he can come up with something. So rather than come up with a riff or a lick or some chord changes and go, that's not going to fly. Because in bands, you know, there's limits to what you can do sometimes. And so with Myles, it's like I can come up with anything. If I think it's good, I can present it to him, and he always comes up with something. So that's why this album is pretty wacky. Because there's a lot of crazy shit I come up with, and I send it to him, and he's like, okay, you know, he comes up with something. Yeah,
nice. All right, this question is from Samara McAvale. You travel a lot, so what is the most shocking / bizarre cultural practice you've ever seen in another country?
I don't know.
Come to Sri Lanka.
I was just gonna say India's got a couple. You know, I've only been there once, but that was definitely different. But it was really, really cool. So I don't know if anything shocks me. You know, at this point, I think the most shocked I ever was culturally in any given place was the very first time I ever went to Japan, because that was very different. You know, I'd been around Europe and around the States and Australia at that point, and going to Japan was like, wow, this is very, very different. And it took a while to sort of get used to a lot of the different customs that went on there, but then, you know, we came down to it, went to the bar, and it was the same. Yeah.
All right, Peter Pledger. Peter's question is, the opening guitar riff for Sweet Child of Mine is one of the most iconic riffs of my generation. What was the inspiration behind it, and how did it come about?
I don't know if there was any real inspiration. It was a melody kind of riff thing that I heard, and that was basically it. And I just remember working it out, and then the other guys hearing it and putting some chord changes underneath it, and it just sort of, you know, took off from there. There wasn't a lot of forethought.
Right. All right, the next question is from Sam Wilkie. Sam's question is, with so many up-and-coming rock/metal bands out there, do you see any guitarists that could one day reach a greatest of all time list? And who is your favourite newly discovered band/guitarist?
Well, okay. I mean, when you think of new bands, I mean, I really have to think in context of what it is that I do and what I was influenced by. And I'm an offshoot of all these guys from before me, right? And that style, there's not too many people that, you know, that I'm familiar with, you know, really sort of doing that. I think Derek Trucks was one of the newest guys that I got into, that was like a young new player that played blues and stuff like that. Everybody else is doing, you know, sort of shock and awe guitar playing. Mm-hmm. So it's hard. I know there's a bunch of rock bands that play like old school, but you don't hear them, you know, in the general scheme of things, you don't hear that much about them. But I haven't heard anybody really sort of getting into it that hard. But I'm sure they're out there, you know. And then as far as bands go, I don't know, most of the new bands that I like, there's one band called Monster Truck that I really dig. But most of the new bands I like are mostly metal bands, because they seem to be, the great thing, I always say this, the great thing about metal is it's like horror movies. It's its own genre, and they're not affected by commerciality so much and keeping up with the Joneses. So they innovate and do their own thing in their own sort of realm, you know, and I dig that. And they always come up with a lot of really interesting stuff. Yeah, right.
Are there any of those metal bands that spring to mind, or is it just in general there's a lot of new stuff which is cool?
Well, the newest metal band is Gojira. That, you know, I mean, they've been around for a while. I just now discovered them, that they've been around for like 8 years or something. Yeah. But they're great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.